The palace bells didn't ring for celebration, they rang like a warning. Because behind sealed chapel doors and under centuries-old beams, a decision was made that has now exploded through royal circles like a silent earthquake. Prince James has inherited Queen Elizabeth's secretive Thornfield estate, and insiders say Camilla's family is furious about what it really means. 9 slow bell strikes cut through the winter air that night. Not the joyful chime that welcomes weddings or state banquets, but a cold, deliberate rhythm that sounded more like history closing one chapter and opening another. Inside the Chapel of the Oak, the doors were locked. No photographers, no reporters, no live stream. The House of Windsor wasn't performing for the world this time. It was conducting something far more serious, a quiet transfer of power that insiders say had been planned for years. The convoy leaving Windsor looked almost suspiciously discreet. 3 unmarked vehicles slipped out under a velvet black sky. No flags, no royal escorts, just silent headlights cutting through Berkshire's back roads more familiar to gamekeepers than journalists. By the time they reached the northern gate of Thornfield Estate, the land itself had already sunk into shadow. And Thornfield is no ordinary royal property. To outsiders, it might appear like another quiet countryside estate tucked into Britain's endless green landscape. But palace insiders describe Thornfield differently. They call it infrastructure. Not a vacation home, not a royal retreat, but a strategic property where royal heirs quietly learn how to manage the monarchy's future before the public ever sees them step into power. Which is why what happened inside the chapel that night has people whispering across royal corridors. A wooden vault was brought forward, not a decorative antique. A ceremonial archive box known in palace circles as the Elizabeth Cabinet. A cabinet with 4 internal drawers. 3 of them had been opened at defining moments in modern royal history. The 4th drawer had never been touched. Until that night, only a handful of figures stood inside the chapel to witness it. No aides with clipboards, no press officers rehearsing statements, just the kind of people whose loyalty to the crown has never needed headlines. The key turned once, then again, and with a soft creak of old timber, the final drawer slid open. Inside was a single velvet envelope. The letter inside it had been written years earlier in the winter of 2016 in handwriting that needed no signature to be recognized. It carried no official royal seal and was never meant for public archives. It had only one intended reader, Prince James. When the envelope was handed to him, the room reportedly fell completely silent. Witnesses later described the moment in chillingly similar words. No drama, no tears, no royal theatrics, just stillness. James read the letter standing beneath the chapel beams darkened by centuries of prayer and oath. At one point, his jaw tightened slightly, his shoulders straightened, and when he reached the final line, he folded the paper carefully, pressed it briefly to his lips, and spoke a single word. Understood. Then the envelope was returned. The drawer closed, the vault sealed again, and outside, the bell struck its final note. By the time dawn crept across Thornfield's frost-covered fields, the estate had already changed hands in spirit, long before it would be confirmed in law. At exactly 9 in the morning, the palace released a short statement. Just a few lines. Cold, precise language stamped with royal authority. Prince James, Earl of Wessex, had been granted full title and custodianship of Thornfield Estate, sole heir, effective immediately. No press conference, no balcony appearance, no smiling photographs on gravel drives, just ink on parchment and finality. To the casual observer, it looked routine. Another generational shift. Another royal heir receiving land and responsibility. But palace watchers noticed something strange almost immediately. The timing. The announcement landed in the middle of a chaotic week filled with royal gossip, media drama, and loud public debates about the monarchy's direction. While headlines screamed elsewhere about disputes and personalities, the crown quietly moved a major piece on the chessboard. And the move had a message. Thornfield isn't simply land, it's leverage. Within royal circles, whoever controls Thornfield doesn't just inherit property. They inherit the ability to shape one of the monarchy's most important long-term projects: environmental stewardship, land reform experiments, and the quiet management structures that keep the institution functioning behind the scenes. That's why insiders inside Clarence House instantly understood the signal. This wasn't indulgence, this was calibration, a tightening of the inner circle around the next generation of royals who will actually operate the monarchy. Young, disciplined, quiet, and untouched by media spectacle. Prince James walking out of the chapel before sunrise symbolized exactly that. Witnesses say he left alone. No aides, no ceremonial escort. He walked the perimeter of Thornfield's outer fields for nearly an hour, boots cutting shallow prints into the frozen ground. At one point, he paused near an orchard planted generations ago. He didn't speak. He didn't wave. He simply looked across the land he had just inherited, because Thornfield has never been about applause. It's about alignment. By mid-morning, journalists were already scrambling to analyze the wording of the decree. Commentators debated the estate's value. Social media erupted with speculation about what the decision meant for the future of the royal family. But the most important message had already been delivered hours earlier, in a candlelit chapel where the monarchy conducted its business the way it always has when something truly important is at stake. Quietly, decisively, and without asking permission. Even more revealing was who endorsed the transfer. The document didn't just carry King Charles's authority. It also carried the endorsement of Princess Anne, and that detail immediately caught the attention of experienced royal observers. Because Anne isn't the monarchy's sentimental voice, she's its enforcement mechanism. When Anne's name appears on a decision like this, it means something inside the palace has already been debated, challenged, and finally locked into place. Which raises the question that has people whispering across royal circles right now. Why Thornfield, and why now? According to insiders, the answer may lie in something the monarchy has been quietly preparing for years: a strategic restructuring of royal assets designed to prevent confusion, conflict, and symbolic power struggles inside the institution. And Thornfield just became the first piece of that puzzle. Because by naming James as sole heir, the palace did something very deliberate. It removed every possible pathway for shared claims. No co-stewards, no symbolic affiliations, no future negotiations over heritage access. The estate now belongs to one guardian, and one guardian only: Prince James. Which is exactly why whispers about frustration from certain royal circles, including those connected to Queen Camilla's extended family, have started surfacing behind palace walls. Because in royal politics, land is never just land. Land is influence. Land is legitimacy. And Thornfield may be the most quietly powerful estate the monarchy controls. And now its gate has closed, and Prince James is standing on the inside. The moment the palace statement went live, royal watchers thought they understood the story. A young royal inheriting a countryside estate, a neat bureaucratic transfer, another quiet line added to the long ledger of royal land holdings. But insiders inside the palace knew that interpretation was far too simple, because Thornfield is not just another estate in the crown's vast rural portfolio. Thornfield is what royal planners call a strategic property, a place designed not for holidays or hunting parties, but for shaping the monarchy's long-term survival. The official wording of the decree was so restrained it almost looked dull, but in royal language, restraint is rarely empty. It is coded. The palace confirmed that Prince James had been designated the sole heir and executive steward of Thornfield, full title and custodianship, effective immediately. That phrase changed everything, because full custodianship doesn't simply mean James owns the estate. It means he now has authority over the entire operational ecosystem connected to it: the trustees, the budgets, the conservation programs, the agricultural systems, even the narrative of the estate's historical identity. And Thornfield's ecosystem is enormous. The estate stretches across thousands of acres of protected countryside bordered by riverlands and chalk ridges. At its center stands a Georgian Palladian manor rarely photographed and even more rarely visited by outsiders. Hidden deeper within the estate are tenant villages operating under agricultural charters centuries old, woodland reserves used for experimental forestry projects, and conservation laboratories that quietly support the Crown's environmental programs. But the most revealing feature of Thornfield is the one the public almost never hears about: the library, a private royal archive containing land treaties, estate audits, and constitutional commentaries stretching across centuries of British governance. According to palace historians, it is one of the last intact private royal research libraries outside Windsor itself. This is not leisure property, it is a working blueprint, and whoever controls it controls a piece of the monarchy's institutional memory, which explains why the palace moved so carefully and so quickly to settle Thornfield's ownership. Because according to officials familiar with the internal discussions, the decision did not come easily. In the weeks leading up to the announcement, several senior courtiers reportedly argued that Thornfield should remain under quiet custodianship rather than being handed to a young royal so soon. Their concerns sounded logical enough on the surface. Handing a complex estate to a young heir could create create unnecessary scrutiny. Martin media might misinterpret the move as favoritism or internal rivalry, and royal history has shown that even routine transfers of land can be turned into dramatic palace chess matches by the public. But those objections were overridden, and that moment when hesitation was dismissed is where the story becomes far more interesting, because overriding palace resistance requires confidence in one thing above all else: alignment. In royal terms, alignment means discipline, loyalty, and insulation from the kinds of controversies that have rocked the monarchy over the past decade. Prince James, according to insiders, represents exactly that: just exposure. Because the monarchy has learned a difficult lesson over the past 2 decades, charisma alone cannot sustain an institution built on centuries of infrastructure. Steadiness can. One former royal administrator described James in a way that has now started circulating quietly among palace staff. He doesn't rush to speak. He listens until he understands the room. That temperament matters, because Thornfield is a complicated balancing act. Its renewable farming programs must expand without alienating traditional tenets. Its conservation initiatives must demonstrate modern relevance without drifting into political territory. Its historical identity must be preserved without turning the estate into a commercial tourist spectacle. None of that requires dramatic leadership. It requires discipline, which brings us back to the moment inside the chapel and the ritual that followed the opening of the sealed drawer. After James finished reading the letter, the ceremony moved into 3 symbolic stages that few outside the palace had ever heard described before. The first was known internally as the covenant. An altar Bible was placed before James, not as a religious gesture, but as a constitutional symbol, representing the ancient covenant between the crown and the country. The message was simple: the land is not a trophy, it is a trust. Then came the second stage. Princess Anne stepped forward holding a small ceremonial blade known as the Clementine dagger, forged in the early 20th century and historically associated with wartime inspection tunnels beneath London. "This land does not belong to us," he reportedly said quietly. "We belong to it." James knelt, placed the dagger and the vessel of soil on the altar, and spoke 4 words that may become one of the defining phrases of the next royal generation: "I serve, not replace." Those words were carefully chosen, because modern royal narratives often turn every new figure into a potential rival to someone else, especially within a family where succession lines are constantly analyzed by the media. But James's vow did something different. It rejected rivalry. It positioned his role as reinforcement rather than competition, not a challenger to Prince George, not a shadow over Princess Charlotte. And for the first time, the quietest royal in the family may also be the one standing closest to the monarchy's long-term future.